Morning, everyone. I believe it's Thursday, October the 20th, 2022. This is a primary review of the Echo PB9010T. As you can see here before you. And for comparison, I do own a Stihl 800X, BR 800X. And so I do have these two units. And give you a little background, I've been landscaping for 41 years, been in business for about that long as well. Used a lot of equipment in my time. I am solo. I did run a crew when I was in my teens for about 5 years, where I would have 50, 60 pieces of equipment, blowers, multiple blowers, backpacks, chainsaws, 50 to 100 pieces of equipment I had to maintain. So that's where I got my start in my teens. Nowadays that I've been in business for myself, I've remained solo for the most part. So I don't use as much of equipment, but I have been doing it for 41 years. So I've still went through quite a bit of equipment, and I try to buy what's considered the best, and I'm always trying to, newer products. So we'll get into my opinion of this video, because I think this blower, which I think warrants a video kind of almost by itself, which I've really not concentrated a lot on this. I've done comparisons, and again, it's going to kind of compare as I've got this one sitting here. So I would say the number one good thing about the blower, a couple things. I think its styling is nice. I like the black and orange. It looks like a beast. It is a beast. So that's good. The motor, I think, is very good. That's a little issue I have with the Stihls, is the 4-mix, or whatever they call it. Has the valve adjustments, which, a little bit of a pain and time consuming. This is kind of more old school, I think, on the Echo, and I do think the motor is, a notch better, and there's no question also, along with that, it's a more powerful unit. So if all you're caring about is sheer raw power, out of every blower I've ever used, the Echo PB9010T is the king of power. So I did some earlier videos where I compared the two out in the yard on some dry leaves, and it clearly showed the Echo would blow in that area, leaves a couple feet further than the 800X that I have, although do realize that all units will tend to run a little different, so your 800 might be a little stronger than my 800, or a little weaker. No two units are identical in the way they run RPM and power, so each machine's kind of unique like people. So we'll get into this, further into this. So the weight of it does bother me a little bit. It's a couple pounds heavier. I definitely notice it. So that's a negative in my opinion. If you're needing the power and the 2 pounds is worth it to you, then by all means, it's not a deal breaker, but I notice it. It's more fatiguing and cumbersome to use. Things that add to that issue, and other things I have, taking it up, because it's heavier and you're taking it in and off of out of a truck trailer. You have all these nooks and crannies here around the carburetor, the air filter, the motor, the gas tank kind of sticks out. On the Stihl unit, it's more smooth. So if you're pulling it out of a trailer, out of the back of a truck, or you're in the brush blowing out leaves, it doesn't get hung up on stuff near as much. This is every day, 3 or 4 or 5 times, 6 times a day. I've got a stick. The gas tank is stuck on the rail on the trailer. And again, the unit's heavier, so I have to lift it up and around and maneuver it around that. So that's an issue that Stihl could do some improvements on. The straps are a lot of adjustment, but with a lot of adjustment, there's a lot of fiddling. So I finally, after 3, 4, 5, 6 months now that I've had this unit, probably 6 months now, I'm finally getting it dialed in. I was getting tangled up in the straps, and because they have so much adjustment and extra length, I've cut them down to what I think I need to get that out of my way. And I'm getting them more dialed in because I think this, again, the Stihl is a win in that department. Less adjustability. It's just where it needs to be, at least for me. And this one, you have to fiddle more, and it has more adjustment, so it can be a pro or con. Depends on you. For me, it's a con. Now we're getting into my major complaint with the unit. And I may not get everything covered here, but my biggest problem is here at the joint. You can see I got a little oil on there, and that's a known thing from Echo. And they told me that when I purchased it, and it's been in the shop for it, and it's not going to be resolved apparently. But I have to lube that up because that will bind and get stuck and become unmovable at some point for you. At least that's what's happening with my unit. So that's a problem. But beyond that, on the tubing, this is so much stiffer. It doesn't move. The accordion here barely will move, hardly at all. It's so stiff. So it relies on this joint back here. And so when you're moving it back and forth, blowing leaves, it shakes the unit on your back. And also your arm requires much more effort to move it back and forth, because you're doing that all day long when you're blowing leaves, especially here in the fall. So it's much more fatiguing, and this kind of hits my hip or my body because this is also wider. And on the Stihl, it's just far superior. It's a little narrower, and you can see the boot, that doesn't really even move back there, and the boot does all the moving. And Stihl Echo needs to step up and do that with this unit as well. That's far too rigid. And people go, well, they want it to be durable and it's commercial. Well, I've owned the Stihl for 8-10 years, different units. And like I said, 41 years of using different products. And I've never had a tubing break on a Stihl blower, ever, never. So even though it's more flexible and apparently lighter or whatever, it's a non-issue as far as any breakage. My other complaint is, along with the tubing on the Echo, is a half a dozen times during the day, I don't know if I'll get it flipped back, on this unit, again, that joint, because they're relying on that joint to twist and do most of your flexing. Why in the world, I don't understand it, would you ever want the tubing to be able to go completely backwards on the unit? So when I'm trying to put it on or lift it out of the trailer, or it's at an odd angle, a half a dozen times during the day, at least, it gets in this position, which throws off the weight of the unit. aggravating. Of course, it doesn't have enough cord to do that, so it engages the throttle and could pull out all the stuff. So I don't know why there's not a stop or something. There's no need for it to ever be in that position. The Stihl does not do that. It cannot do that. It relies a whole 100% on this joint here, the accordion, I'll call it, boot, to flex. That's where all the movement is. I mean, this rotates up here, and again, that's never ever bound or been needed lubricated. And on the Echo, I've had to do it every couple weeks, lubricate it. And like I said, on the Stihl, that's never been a problem. Also, it's impossible for that tubing to go anywhere. The range of motion is all out front, back and forth 2 or 3 feet. There's no need to blow behind you while you're going forward. So that's quite aggravating with the Echo. I'm not a fanboy of either one per se. I just call it like I see it. I've used lots of Echo blowers. They're 770 or 750 or the different models they've had. I've had a dozen Echoes. I've had a dozen Stihl. I've had a dozen Red Maxes, approximately. So I just thought I'd go back and try Echo and hear a lot of good things. You know, the power, and the power is good. But the fit and finish of it, especially in the tubing department, is my #1 gripe. That it's sorely lacking. And to me, if today these got stolen or broke down or I needed a new blower, I would be buying the Stihl. I would not buy an Echo just because it's more powerful. And that is true, but because of all these other issues, now there's no Stihl dealer and there's none available, then maybe I would get the Echo. But if I had the choice and they're both with what I know today, I would buy a Stihl 800 over the Echo for the reasons that I just discussed. And when it was hotter out this summer, we'll regress here a little bit, I had issues, and I have that with the Stihl products as well, a vapor lock or something. It would just not accept throttle when it, you know, the days when it was upper 80s, low 90s, humid. And I had it in the dealer. They said they could find nothing wrong, and they had it for a month. I got it back. I just continued using the Stihl for all these things that I've just discussed. Finally, with the fall, I said, well, it's time to, you know, take advantage of the big boy and use the extra power, which I'm doing, but I still struggle with all these different things. And now in the fall, so that was never addressed, the overheating issue, not necessarily overheating, but when it was really hot, not wanting to take throttle. Now in the fall, I'm kind of getting an opposite thing where it's kind of cold nature. I first started up, it's kind of minor, but it takes 30 seconds to a minute or so. You just can't turn it on and go and start blowing anything. It has to warm up. But once it comes online and, you know, reaches temperature or whatever, it's, you know, works, it seems to be working great in the fall. So, so that's my time on that. So to recap, the tubing really needs to be addressed. It's not flexible enough. Stop the tube from coming completely behind you. Maybe do an update on the housing and enclose it like this would make it better. If you could find a way to knock off a couple pounds, which is the least of my gripes. It is a gripe, but it's the least of them. But overall, if you could improve the tubing, do the housing, Echo would be, in my opinion, the best blower I've ever used. But it's lacking in that department. So that's my time. Appreciate all the subscribers. Please like and subscribe. Appreciate it. And hopefully this has been helpful. That's my time on the Echo PB 9010T. Thank you.